Welcome back to Quick Bits. This week, we're talking about Courthouse Becky's 76 ethics complaints. Lots going on ahead of the Baldwin trial coming up in July. And of course, week 6 of the Karen Read trial. And it looks like there's 2+ more weeks of this trial before the jury gets it. So maybe another week of the prosecution and a week of the defense. We need to break it down, and I'm going to try to do it quickly, so let's get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. This is the Quick Bits, where I break down just the main points of the pop culture and entertainment cases I'm currently covering on YouTube and the Emily Show podcast. Let's get into it. First, on the podcast, The Emily Show, last week, I covered Courthouse Becky, who was the clerk of court for the Murdaugh case, and the 76 ethics complaints against her. Do I think some of these will be brought in a criminal complaint at some point? Yes. The behavior alleged can be criminally charged if that happens down the road. This has been referred for prosecution based on multiple reportings, and I'm not surprised. How long will that take? I don't know. She was only clerk of court for under 4 years. So this is a lot of complaints of her not only paying herself bonuses out of the county's child support funds, but also reimbursing herself for expenses for someone's birthday party, for Jägermeister and limoncello for a party, for Smirnoff Ice for a party, reimbursing herself for lunches for herself, for parties for people leaving the solicitor's office, for lunches for people from the AG's office, and more. All of that breakdown is in the podcast, along with more discussion of Alec Baldwin, as lots is happening ahead of trial. Alec Baldwin and his wife Hilaria announced that they are going to be doing a TLC reality show with all of their children. Yes, all 7 of their Baldwinitos. And it seems that cameras might be rolling because this show is scheduled to come to TLC in 2025. I wonder if they are going to have cameras rolling, covering not just Baldwin's side of the trial, but the family's reaction to it, because we know how much reality TV interest there is in the behind the scenes of trials. And I imagine that they are going to lean into that. There is going to be so much around the Baldwin trial. I'm sure there will be multiple documentaries or docuseries, his own show. There was news and filings that he was running a documentary. I don't know if that's now become this show or what, but we will see how much there is after this trial is done in July. I also covered the state's motion to give use immunity, which is a limited type of immunity, to Hannah Gutierrez. The use immunity would allow her to testify truthfully against Alec Baldwin and be called by the state, even though her appeal is pending, which means that the state could not use what she testifies to against her in the future or for new prosecutions. So everything she testified to at trial would be protected. Of course, Alec Baldwin's team has now objected to that, and the court set a hearing for the end of June, on June 21st. It seems that I will still be covering the Karen Read trial on that day, but I will break it down as soon as I can. And there is still ongoing briefing with regard to Baldwin's motions to dismiss in the Rust case. One motion to dismiss based on destruction of evidence, a second one based on failure to state a claim, and Baldwin and the state are still fighting over witnesses. This litigation is going to continue to be day after day of filings until this July 10th trial date. I think that the defense will probably bury the state in a bit of paper, but also there is legitimately quite a lot happening. By the time we get out of the Karen Read trial, we're going to have like 3 days, and then we're going to just jump right back into New Mexico, I suppose. And speaking of Karen Read, let's talk about week 6. The court schedule in Karen Read continues to have days off, half days, and what have you, though it seems that the court is going to be extending the days and shortening the lunches so that this trial actually gets done on time because of the exceedingly slow pace the prosecution is moving at. Things that I am hoping that we see this week in week 7 are, how the victim was injured, what the victim's injuries were, what caused the victim's death, the technical data from the defendant's car, any data from the victim's phone and the defendant's phone. We know how much we learn in trials from the digital evidence, and it's frustrating that we have not seen that yet. So on Monday, June 3rd, we started with Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara from the CERT team. This is a search team, not necessarily a crime scene processing team, but the CERT team has never, he said, processed a scene in the snow like this. They normally search for people. They were called out to the scene by Trooper Tully, who told them that they were looking for taillight pieces and a missing shoe. They responded to 34 Fairview on January 29th, and using a grid pattern and shovels, they uncovered pieces of taillight from under the snow in the afternoon, like 4:30, after 4:30 p.m., as it was starting to get dark in January, from 34 Fairview. They recovered multiple pieces of red and clear plastic near the street between the fire hydrant and the flagpole. So the plastic was found at the street, but horizontally between the fire hydrant and the flagpole. Later in the week, we of course see pieces of plastic recovered from all over the yard at 34 Fairview, but this plastic recovered was near the street, which to me seems more consistent with a collision that is supposed to have happened on the street. We think. We don't have all the information on that from the state yet. And it was found that same day, January 29th. They also located a sneaker flush up against the curb, upside down in fresh, undisturbed snow. Then we got into the crime lab witnesses and a number of crime lab witnesses on Monday and Tuesday. The crime lab first witness was Maureen Hartnett, who testified about processing Karen Reed's Lexus LX 570. It is a 2021 vehicle, and the noted damage, and we saw pictures of the noted damage, a small dent on the upper portion of the tailgate close to the glass, a broken taillight, and some scratches on the bumper, along with some glass on the bumper and a small hair on the quarter panel. The glass and the hair were collected. The broken taillight was swabbed on the exterior portions for DNA. This is also the crime lab witness that swabbed the victim's clothes for a variety of different things. But what was most helpful in seeing the victim's clothes is seeing the exterior light hoodie, because there were lots of markings and little flags on the right arm of the victim's hoodie that showed punctures on the right sleeve and damage to that sweatshirt that looked like punctures on the right sleeve. It didn't look like it had been dragged on a street. It didn't look like road rash you might get if you fall off a bike or if you slide. It was more discreet damage to the right sleeve area of the victim's shirt, and that had been a question in my mind. Was there any damage to the exterior of the victim's clothing? And it's clear that there was. It was helpful to see those photographs. It was helpful to see all the white flags from the crime scene technician showing where that damage was, and then the close-up photos of that. And the crime scene technician swabbed that entire sleeve all together, not individually around the different areas of damage to the sweatshirt. We also saw the victim's pants with belt attached, the shirt being worn underneath the hoodie, and one shoe that was recovered from the hospital. Later in the week, we see the other shoe that was recovered from the crime scene in court. All the items were submitted to the crime lab on March 14th, and that includes all the red pieces of plastic. There was also debris from the victim's clothes that were all combined. So there's no way to know if the debris that was later tested by the crime lab was from shirt or pants or what have you. It was all combined. And the testimony elicited by the state was fairly confusing about where the debris came from and what debris it was. And if it was just sitting on the clothes or embedded in the clothes, it was not super clear. Then the next witness 53, was Ashley Valaire. This crime lab technician is a trace and physical match technician, and they went through a tremendous amount of testimony showing each evidence bag and which pieces of plastic came out of the evidence bags. And then this witness pieced them all together, literally puzzle pieced a taillight back together and placed it back into the casing. And we saw pictures in court of the taillight almost complete and put back into the casing of taillight that was taken from the victim's car by the previous witness. What the defense pointed out on cross-examination that I thought was very powerful testimony was that there were small pieces of taillight that were never recovered, but it seems that those pieces, and the way Yannetti asked the question, was that those small missing pieces seemed to be consistent with the witness testimony from Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe about how much taillight was missing. Not that the entire thing was gone, but there was a small crack or break in the taillight. And those pieces seemingly weren't recovered based on the fact that there was a void in that completed taillight. On day 20, that testimony and that cross-examination continued, but I combined all of that testimony into one. But I thought it was a very effective, even though brief, cross-examination by Yannetti. Then Christina Hanley, who is a supervisor at the crime lab and also a trace and physical match expert, testified. Interestingly enough, from Christina Hanley's testimony, the glass taken from the bumper of the Lexus did not match, like on a chemical level, did not match the glass found near the victim, the like bottom piece of a drinking glass. And I thought that was very interesting testimony that was elicited on cross-examination, that the glass on the bumper matched a piece of glass found in the street, but those pieces did not match the glass found near the victim. So why is there so much glass and where did it come from? Then on day 20, Wednesday, June 5th, we got into the testimony of Yuri Bukhenik, and he pronounced his last name for Alan Jackson on cross-examination like 2 or 3 times, but Bukhenik, I think, is the best I'm going to get. And over Wednesday and the half day on Thursday, day 21, reminding you that there was no court on Friday, we got into all of the testimony of Yuri Bukhenik. And I'm going to go through the direct examination and then the cross-examination, which will resume on Monday, June 10th, after this episode airs. So if you still haven't joined me live, now is the time. And if you're waiting for Trooper Proctor to testify because his name's been all over this case, the defense stated after court that the Commonwealth will be calling Trooper Proctor. So if you're like, girl, I'm waiting until we get into the defense case, I get it, but maybe don't miss Trooper Proctor's testimony. And if you have the Law Nerd app at lawnerd.app.com or in your app store at Law Nerd app, our free app will notify you when these witnesses take the stand. We send out those notifications while we are watching live court. So if you want to tune in when Trooper Proctor testifies or when we get to cross-examination of key witnesses, I will keep you in the loop on the free app. Because this case has taken forever and I know you can't watch every minute of it with me. So let's talk about Trooper B. During direct examination, we don't really learn how these troopers got notified. We learn that Sergeant Bukhenik is the supervisor of Trooper Proctor and has been essentially acting as his supervisor for the duration that they've worked together, that they are assigned to Norfolk and work with the Norfolk County DA's office doing homicide investigations. We learned that he responded to the hospital, saw the victim in hospital, described the victim's injuries, and then was trying to give testimony about what he thought would have caused those injuries, which were the objections to which were properly sustained because this is not a medical expert. But he was trying very hard to get into what he believed the cause of the victim's injuries were before we've ever heard from the coroner or pathologist. So that was interesting that the prosecution was trying to elicit that testimony and the court shut it down. It also felt to me early on in this sergeant's testimony that at times he was trying to answer the internet, which I don't think ever looks good to a jury because it seems really out of context. He was adding on explanations to things and answering really more than was asked. And it was odd during the direct examination to have so much kind of thrown into answers. He testified that he and Trooper Proctor recovered the victim's soaking clothes from the hospital. He also said that the clothes smelled to him like vomit. He talked about the fact that the injuries on the victim's arm appeared to be abrasions. For any of you that have been watching this trial and saw what EMS personnel referred to as scratches or furrows, it was interesting to me that this trooper was saying that they were abrasions and then trying to give definitions of what abrasions were in a medical sense. But they talked about bagging all of the victims' clothes together, taking it back to the station, and then laying it out on butcher paper. We learn under cross-examination that those items aren't bagged into evidence bags until February 4th, 2022. So it seems that those items were left on butcher paper in an office to dry from January 29th till February 4th, 2022. We then hear that Bukhenik went to Karen Reed's parents' house to interview her. They seized her phone and her vehicle at her parents' house. We saw some doorbell footage from her parents' house showing the tow truck taking Karen Reed's car, and you can see Karen Reed's rear taillight as the tow truck driver is driving the vehicle up onto the flatbed and hitting the brakes. And so that was shown in court. The trooper testified that you could see the damage to the rear taillight, or you could see that it wasn't all red consistently. It's hard to tell if that is part of the backup light or if that is broken without seeing both taillights illuminated at once. But there is white light showing through the taillight. So will we see more of that footage during cross-examination, or will we see it examined again? I don't know. We then got into video with this witness from CF McCarthy's in the waterfall showing the defendant drinking. This witness went through and counted the drinks handed by the bartender that seemed like tall vodka sodas with a lime in them, and then shots that the defendant got from the bartender and poured back into the tall glass. During the conversation at the defendant's parents' house, Trooper Proctor testified that she told him that she was drinking vodka soda, that they went to CF McCarthy's around 9:30, that she didn't take a drink from CF McCarthy's over to the waterfall, that she drove from the waterfall to Fairview to drop John off and didn't see him walk into the house. She made a 3-point turn and left. She said that the damage to her vehicle had happened, quote, last night, but she didn't know how. And she said that she didn't want to go into the party at 34 Fairview because she was having stomach issues and just wanted to go home, and then woke up and couldn't find John O'Keefe, and then found him in the snow, started CPR, and saw him bleeding and saw his eyes swollen. Sergeant Bukhenik seemed to get a bit confused about how many drinks Karen Reed had had, and the prosecution asks him again on Thursday when testimony resumes, how many total drinks did you see her have? He testified that it was 9 drinks total. Again, assuming that the drinks handed from the bartender are vodka sodas and then the shots are vodka being added to the drink. It was numerous of the tall drinks from CF McCarthy's, numerous shots from CF McCarthy's, and then 1 drink at the waterfall. The receipts from CF McCarthy's in the waterfall were admitted into evidence but not put up on the screen, so the jury will have those to review to determine the drinks purchased by Karen Reed and the video we saw at each of the timestamps, what was being handed to her, and they will have that entire video to review as well. During Wednesday's testimony, Trooper Bukhenik started going through video of Karen Reed's car being brought in to the Sally Port at Canton PD. He said the reason they chose to take it all the way from her parents' house down to Canton PD is because it's closer to where the incident happened, and it's a heated Sally Port, so the snow would melt off the vehicle because the Sally Port was heated. He also testified that he was in his personal vehicle because his work vehicle didn't have 4-wheel drive and there was quite a lot of snow. So he was in his personal truck following the vehicle from Karen Reed's parents' home down to Canton PD. I just have to wonder if the tow truck driver took photos of the damage to Karen Reed's vehicle when it was loaded up onto the flatbed, but I suppose we will see or not see whether that was done. It'd be really helpful if it was. We wouldn't have to rely on video that's hard to make anything out of, but we haven't heard from the tow truck driver yet. I'm very much hoping that we will. We also saw video Wednesday from inside the Sally Port at Canton PD, which became a topic of cross-examination on Thursday because the video from the Sally Port seems to show the passenger side of Karen Reed's car based on the direction it's pulled in. But the chat was pointing out that the bay doors from the Sally Port have a number 4 on them that was inverted and that was flipped. And then there was writing on the back of a police car, like a classic police car parked in Canton PD. Then the writing on that was also flipped. But the prosecution asked the sergeant if that was a true and accurate reflection of what happened in the Sally Port. And the trooper was like, yes, it absolutely was. Well, on cross-examination the next day, when Alan Jackson starts asking, is this true and accurate? He's like, well, it's a mirrored image, but it's still accurate. And as we got into that cross-examination, Alan Jackson points out, well, if it's mirrored, then aren't we looking at the driver's side door? But wouldn't the jury be left with the impression that this was the passenger side door based on the way the vehicle is parked? And the sergeant agreed, yes, it could leave that impression. So the video is the video, but that shit's flipped. And it's odd to me that the prosecution never addressed it when showing the video to the trooper or asking the trooper about it being flipped during direct examination, because it could leave that impression. And the jury might have noticed the way the chat did. When you look at the 4, it's clearly flipped. When you look at the writing on the cop car, it's clearly flipped. It's very odd to me that the prosecution didn't address it at all in the direct examination. Because if there's nothing there, why not just address it and say what side of the vehicle is being shown to the jury? It was never asked. And then before we get to the end of direct examination on Thursday, the prosecution made a choice that I absolutely don't understand. And they played a conversation of Karen Reed that was recorded by Sergeant Bukhenik on June 9th, 2022. And we're going to talk about that after today's Quick Bit sponsor. Thank you to today's podcast sponsor, Lume. Look, it is beautiful weather right now, and it is the time of year I just want to get outside and go to a concert and throw my hands in the air like I just don't care. And with Lume, I have the confidence to just not care because I know that the BO is handled. Lume is a whole body deodorant that is baking soda and paraben free and pH balanced, meaning it's safe to use from pits to feet and everything in between. It was created by an OBGYN and is clinically proven to block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. Plus, they have a ton of incredible scents like clean tangerine, lavender sage, and toasted coconut, which does smell like you are on a tropical beach. So if you are ready to get started, Lume's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant and a cream tube deodorant, plus 2 free products of your choice, like the mini body wash or deodorant wipes that I love so much. So for you new customers, you get 15% off all Lume products with our exclusive code. And if you combine that 15% off with the discount already on the starter pack, it is a total of over 40% off the starter pack. Use code EDBQB, like the Quick Bits, for 15% off your first purchase at lumedeodorant.com. That's EDBQB at LUMEDEODORANT.com. Let's get back to the Quick Bits. When the prosecution played this clip, the prosecution was very clear to say this is a conversation. I went back and watched it because I wanted to know if the prosecution had said that that was an interview or a conversation. And the prosecution was very careful to say it was a conversation. In my coverage of it, I said both conversation and interview, but I wanted to make sure there was no confusion there that the prosecution elicited the word conversation. And I went back and listened to this audio a few times, and I'm going to play that for you in just a moment after I tell you what I heard and why I'm surprised the prosecution did this. The audio played in court, what I hear Karen Reed saying is, quote, "You're aware that he was beaten up by Brian and Colin Albert. I mean, we're all in on the same joke, right? My taillight's cracked and John's just pulverized." She may have said John was pulverized, but it sounded like John's just pulverized to me. I'm going to let you listen to it and see what you think.
Okay, you're aware he was beaten up by Brian and Colin Albert. I mean, we're all in on the same joke, right? My taillight was cracked and John was pulverized.
Why am I surprised the prosecution played this? Well, if there's more of that recorded conversation, the defense will be allowed to bring it in for completeness. Generally, the defense can't bring in the defendant's own statements unless they are clearly statements against interest. I don't think this is a statement against her interest because she's talking about Brian and Colin Albert and talking about the fact it seems that her being prosecuted for this is a joke. I think this opens the door to the defense arguing their third-party culpability. Remember, the defense has to establish in evidence during the prosecution's case in chief that there is room to argue a third-party culpability defense. And the prosecution has just admitted a statement that the defense could not bring in on their own, where the defendant is saying, you're aware that he was beaten up by Brian and Colin Albert. I'm very interested by this choice, and the prosecution never followed up on it. They just kind of let it lie. There was a quick question afterwards, and then an objection that was sustained, and then they moved on to only elicit that both Proctor and Bukhenik gave DNA samples to another law enforcement officer. Why elicit a self-serving statement from the defendant that under the rules of evidence, the defendant can't bring in themselves? That, again, seems very consistent with the defense's theory of the case. Also, are we going to hear the rest of that statement during cross-examination? Because now the defense has a right, if there is more statement, to bring it in through their cross-examination. I'm very interested to hear what happens because we haven't even gotten there yet. We're still on the Sallyport video and cross-examination. We're not even close to this statement, but it should be noted for those who have not followed this case super closely that June 9th was also the day that Karen Reed was indicted on the elevated charges, adding that second-degree murder charge. So it seems to me this conversation would have happened in connection with that indictment and probably any booking that happened with that indictment, though Sergeant Bukhenik said after she made that statement, he advised her to not say anything else. So we'll see if there's more to that statement during cross-examination on Monday, June 10th. Let me know what you think in the comments. This case is confounding, and I'm waiting for the digital evidence, but it seems that we are not going to get this case to closing and to the jury for decision until the very last week of June. And the court, looking exhausted, told the jury at the end of the day, Thursday, I hope to have this case to you the last week of June. So that would indicate that closing arguments will probably be on June 21st or June 24th, and then the jury will be deliberating while I'm at VidCon. So, law nerds, stay in the loop. We're going to be doing some mobile trial coverage again, but we're in it at this point. We've got maybe 3 more weeks of this case. So, can't stop, won't stop. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a law nerd. I hope the quick bits are helping you stay in the loop with this case and others. And I will see you, well, let's be honest, I'll see you in the chat on the live stream, and I can't wait. So I'll see you then. Bye. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.